She was just a young congresswoman from Ohio, sitting quietly in the Capitol's back row, dismissed as a rookie by the room's power players. When Adam Schiff mocked her in front of Congress, she didn't shout back. She listened, her notebook clutched tight. But that notebook held secrets Schiff never saw coming, tied to a legacy he couldn't imagine. So, who was really out of their depth that day? Before we dive into today's story, if you find this video interesting, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming stories. You're also welcome to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Every piece of feedback is truly valuable in helping Crossfire Justice improve. Thank you so much for always being with us. And now, let's jump into this thrilling and unexpected story together. The hearing room in the U.S. Capitol hums with a restless energy, its high ceilings and polished wood panels amplifying every whispered conversation. Rows of lawmakers, staffers, and reporters pack the space, their eyes fixed on the central podium where Adam Schiff, a veteran congressman from California, prepares to speak. His tailored suit and confident stride command the room, and the air feels charged with the weight of a debate over a new surveillance law. In the back row, almost hidden behind a sea of suits, sits Karoline Leavitt, a first-term congresswoman from Ohio. Her plain navy blazer and neatly pinned hair make her blend into the background, unnoticed by the bustling crowd. She's young, barely 30, and her nameplate, tucked among dozens, draws no special attention. Karoline's hands rest on a worn leather notebook, its edges frayed from years of use. She adjusts her glasses, her brown eyes sharp and unyielding, though her face remains calm, betraying none of the storm brewing inside. Schiff steps to the microphone, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. He speaks of national security, of threats looming in the shadows, his words heavy with urgency. But then his tone shifts, a subtle edge creeping in as he gestures toward the newer lawmakers. "We can't afford inexperience in times like these," he says, his eyes sweeping the room. "Some of you might mean well, but this isn't a game for rookies." A ripple of laughter spreads, and a staffer 2 rows ahead of Karoline leans to his colleague, whispering loud enough for her to hear she's one of those. Why's she even here? Karoline's jaw tightens, a faint flush creeping up her neck. She feels the weight of every glance, every smirk, as if the room has decided her worth before she's spoken a word. Her fingers press harder against the notebook, the leather cool under her touch, grounding her. She knows what they see: a small-town girl from Ohio, barely a year into her term, her accent still carrying traces of the Midwest. They don't know about the late nights she spent studying law in her father's cramped study, or the promises she made to him before he passed. They don't know about the notebook, filled with months of research, cross-referenced data, and quiet determination. Schiff finishes his speech, his accusations hanging in the air like smoke. As he steps down, he glances toward Karoline's corner, his lips curling into a dismissive smirk. The crowd claps, their approval a dull roar in her ears. A reporter in the gallery jots notes, barely glancing her way. Karoline's heart pounds, not with fear but with something fiercer: defiance, coiled tight, waiting for its moment. She doesn't speak. Not yet. Her eyes follow Schiff as he returns to his seat, his allies nodding in agreement. The staffer's whisper echoes in her mind, each word a small cut. But Karoline's gaze doesn't waver. She thinks of her father, his voice steady as he taught her to seek truth, no matter the cost. The notebook in her hands feels heavier now, its pages a silent promise. Around her, the room moves on, oblivious to the resolve hardening in her chest. A clerk shuffles papers nearby, and a woman in the row ahead adjusts her scarf, her face blank, They don't see it. But something in Karoline's stillness hints at a storm gathering strength. As the gavel bangs to signal a break, she opens her notebook, her pen hovering over a single line. What does she know that could silence them all? The marble hallway of the U.S. Capitol stretches long and cold, its polished floors reflecting the soft glow of chandeliers overhead. Karoline Leavitt stands alone near a towering column, her modest navy blazer blending into the grandeur of the space. The hearing has just ended, and the corridor hums with the footsteps of staffers and lawmakers hurrying to their next appointments. Karoline's hands clutch her worn leather notebook, its edges soft from years of handling, as if it's an anchor keeping her steady. Her brown eyes, sharp behind her glasses, trace the intricate patterns on the floor. But her mind is elsewhere, replaying Schiff's dismissive smirk and the staffer's cutting whisper she's just a rookie. The words sting, not because they're new, but because they echo a lifetime of being underestimated, first in her small Ohio town, then in law school, and now here, in the heart of Washington. A senior aide, his tie slightly loosened, strides past, his phone pressed to his ear. He glances at Karoline, his eyes narrowing as if she's an intruder in this world of power. "Don't waste your time, kid," he mutters, barely slowing his pace. "Schiff's got this locked. Go back to Ohio." Karoline's chest tightens, a familiar ache rising in her throat. She nods politely, her lips pressed into a thin line, but her heart races with a mix of anger and resolve. She's used to this people seeing her youth, her plain clothes, and assuming she's out of her depth. But the aide doesn't know what she carries, not just in her notebook, but in her memory, her father's voice, steady and warm, telling her that truth is a weapon sharper than any shout. She steps to the side, leaning against the cool marble wall, and opens her notebook. Tucked inside is a faded photograph, creased at the corners, showing a young Karoline, no older than 10, standing beside a man in a judge's robe. Her father, Judge Thomas Leavitt, his smile proud as he held her hand outside an Ohio courthouse. He'd been a pillar in their community, known for his fairness, until a sudden heart attack took him 5 years ago. Karoline's fingers trace his face in the photo, her breath catching. He'd taught her to listen, to gather evidence, to wait for the right moment, never rush the truth. "Caro," he'd said, "it'll stand when everything else falls." She closes her eyes, letting his words settle her nerves. Around her, the hallway pulses with activity. A group of reporters passes, their laughter echoing as they discuss Schiff's speech. A woman in a sharp blazer adjusts her scarf, her eyes skimming over Karoline without a second thought. But not everyone ignores her. A janitor, his gray uniform blending into the background, pauses his cart a few feet away. His hands rest on the handle, and his weathered face softens as he watches her. Karoline doesn't notice him, lost in her thoughts. But his gaze lingers, as if he senses something the others miss. He's seen countless lawmakers come and go, but there's a quiet strength in this young woman, a fire banked but burning. Karoline slips the photo back into her notebook, her fingers brushing against pages filled with meticulous notes. Dates, names, and fragments of emails she's pieced together over months. They point to something troubling about Schiff's surveillance law, something he's hidden from the public. She's not ready to reveal it, not yet. The aide's words echo in her mind, each one a challenge. Don't waste your time. But she's not wasting anything. She's waiting, just as her father taught her. Her heart steadies, the ache in her chest giving way to a quiet determination. She's not here to shout, not yet. She's here to listen, to watch, to prepare. As she starts to walk away, her steps soft against the marble, The janitor's eyes follow her. He pushes his cart slowly, his expression unreadable but thoughtful. Karoline doesn't see him, doesn't know that someone, even someone as overlooked as he is, has noticed her. She turns a corner, her notebook tucked under her arm, her mind already racing toward the next hearing. The hallway grows quiet, but the air feels heavier now, charged with the weight of what's to come. What truth is she carrying? And when will she choose to let it speak? The grand hearing room in the U.S. Capitol feels tighter today, its air heavy with the weight of expectation. Rows of dark wooden benches are packed with lawmakers, their murmurs blending with the rustle of reporters' notepads in the gallery above. The high ceiling, adorned with intricate gold leaf, looms over the scene, amplifying every sound: a cough, a chair creaking, the sharp tap of a gavel. Karoline Leavitt sits in her usual spot in the back row, her navy blazer pressed but unremarkable among the sea of tailored suits. Her worn leather notebook lies open on her lap, its pages filled with neat handwriting, but her hands rest still, betraying none of the tension coiled in her chest. She's been awake since dawn, rehearsing her words, knowing today's session on the surveillance law could be her chance to speak. Adam Schiff, the seasoned congressman from California, takes the podium, his presence commanding as he adjusts his glasses and leans into the microphone. His voice is smooth, authoritative, carrying the weight of years in Washington. The threats we face today demand vigilance. He begins, his tone grave. But I must caution this body against the recklessness of inexperience. His eyes scan the room, lingering briefly on the newer faces, including Karoline's. Some among us, with their limited tenure, risk undermining our national security with naive objections. The words land like a slap, and a ripple of agreement passes through the room. Nods from senior lawmakers, a faint smile from an aide near the front. Karoline feels her cheeks warm, the sting of being singled out sharp and familiar. She's not named, but she doesn't need to be. Everyone knows who the newcomers are. She shifts in her seat, her heart thudding against her ribs. She thinks of her father, Judge Thomas Leavitt, his calm voice guiding her through moments of doubt. Truth doesn't need volume, Caro. It needs clarity. She'd promised him she'd honor his legacy, but sitting here, under the weight of Schiff's condescension, that promise feels heavier than ever. Her fingers brush the edge of her notebook, where a faded photo of her and her father is tucked inside. She wants to speak, to challenge Schiff's narrative, but the room feels like it's closing in, every eye a potential critic. Karoline takes a breath and rises, her legs steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Mr. Chairman," she begins, her voice clear but soft, "I'd like to address the evidence behind this law." The room quiets, heads turning her way. She's barely spoken 2 sentences when Schiff cuts in, his tone dripping with patronizing courtesy. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, this isn't a place for novices to test their theories." A chuckle spreads through the room, low and mocking, and Karoline's face burns. She glances at the gallery, where a junior reporter, a young woman with a notepad, furrows her brow, her pen pausing. The laughter fades, but the humiliation lingers. Searing. Karoline sits, her hands trembling as she grips her notebook. She wants to disappear, to shrink into the bench, but her father's words echo again. Stand, even when they laugh. Schiff continues, his voice regaining its rhythm, but Karoline's mind sharpens, cutting through the haze of embarrassment. She replays his speech, catching inconsistencies, exaggerated threats, vague references to classified data. Her notes, months of late nights poring over public records and leaked memos, tell a different story. She's not wrong. She knows it. But the room's laughter still rings in her ears, and doubt creeps in. What if she's overreached? What if she's just a rookie? Like they say. A clerk moves quietly along the aisle, his steps muffled by the thick carpet. He leans toward Karoline, slipping a folded note onto her desk before retreating. She hesitates, her pulse quickening, then unfolds it. The handwriting is neat, unfamiliar. They're watching you. Stay sharp, her eyes narrow, scanning the room for the source. The reporter in the gallery is still writing, her expression focused. A senior aide near Schiff adjusts his tie, his gaze flickering her way. Karoline's breath catches. The note feels like a lifeline, but also a warning. Who sent it? Someone who believes in her, or someone testing her resolve? She tucks the note into her notebook, her hands steadier now. Schiff wraps up, his smug smile returning as he takes his seat to scattered applause. Karoline's heart races, not with shame anymore, but with a spark of defiance. She's been pushed to a line she won't cross. The room may see a novice, but she sees a fight worth having. Her eyes linger on Schiff, then shift to the reporter, who meets her gaze for a fleeting moment. Something unspoken passes between them. As the gavel bangs, signaling a recess, Karoline closes her notebook, her mind racing. What's at stake if she speaks again? And who's watching her now? The anteroom off the Capitol's main corridor is a small, quiet refuge from the chaos of the hearing. Its walls, lined with faded portraits of long-forgotten senators, absorb the distant hum of voices from the hallway. A single window lets in pale afternoon light, casting shadows across a worn oak table where Karoline Leavitt sits alone. Her navy blazer hangs neatly over the back of a chair, and her worn leather notebook lies open before her, its pages filled with tight, precise handwriting. She leans forward, her glasses slipping slightly as she traces a finger over a list of dates and names, cross-referenced with fragments of emails she's painstakingly collected. These aren't just notes, they're a map of inconsistencies in Adam Schiff's case for the surveillance law. A web of exaggerated threats and buried truths. Karoline's brow furrows, her heart heavy with the weight of what she's found. She knows what's at stake, but the memory of Schiff's interruption and the room's laughter still burns, making her question if she's ready to step into the fire. Her solitude is broken by the sharp creak of the door. A senior congressman, one of Schiff's closest allies, strides in, his silver hair catching the light. His suit is crisp, his presence imposing, and his eyes narrow as they land on Karoline's notebook. "What's this?" he asks, his voice low but edged with disdain. He steps closer, peering at the open pages, and a smirk tugs at his lips. "You think you can challenge Adam with that? You're nobody here, kid." The word nobody lands like a stone, and Karoline feels a familiar ache in her chest, the same one she felt as a girl when classmates mocked her second-hand clothes, or when law school peers dismissed her small-town roots. But she doesn't flinch. She meets his gaze, her brown eyes steady behind her glasses, and says, "This nobody has evidence." Her voice is calm, almost soft, but it carries a quiet force that makes the congressman pause. He laughs, a short, dismissive bark, and shakes his head. "Evidence? You're out of your depth. Leave it. Go back to Ohio before you embarrass yourself further." But as he turns to leave, his eyes flicker with something new: doubt, or maybe fear. Karoline watches him go, her hands trembling slightly as she grips the edge of the table. She's not naive. She knows men like him protect their own, and Schiff's influence runs deep, but her father's voice echoes in her mind. Truth doesn't bend to power, Caro. It breaks it. She glances at her notebook, at the faded photo of her and her father tucked inside. Judge Thomas Leavitt, with his kind smile and unyielding sense of justice, seems to watch her now, urging her to keep going. The door hasn't fully closed when Karoline notices a shadow lingering in the doorway. It's the junior reporter from the hearing, a young woman with a notepad clutched to her chest. Her dark hair is pulled back, and her eyes are wide, as if she's just heard something she wasn't meant to. Karoline stiffens, unsure if she's a friend or another skeptic. The reporter hesitates, then steps inside, her voice a whisper. "I heard what you said. About evidence." Karoline's pulse quickens, but before she can respond, her phone buzzes on the table. She glances at the screen, a text from an unknown number. "Your father would be proud." Her breath catches, her fingers hovering over the phone. She looks up at the reporter, who's watching her closely, almost knowingly. "I know who you are," the reporter says softly, her words heavy with meaning. "You're Judge Leavitt's daughter." Karoline's heart stumbles. She hasn't spoken her father's name in Washington, hasn't leaned on his legacy to gain favor. How does this stranger know? The reporter takes another step, her voice barely audible. "My dad worked with him in Ohio. He always said your father was the best judge he ever met." Karoline's throat tightens, a mix of pride and grief washing over her. She wants to ask more, to understand this connection, but the reporter's eyes dart to the notebook. "Is it true? Do you really have something on Schiff?" Karoline hesitates, her mind racing. The congressman's laughter still echoes, but the reporter's words and that mysterious text feel like a spark in the dark. She closes her notebook, her fingers lingering on the leather cover. The room feels smaller now, the portraits on the walls watching like silent witnesses. Outside, the hallway hums with footsteps, and Karoline knows the hearing will resume soon. She's at a crossroads: speak now and risk everything, or wait and gather more strength. The reporter's gaze is steady, expectant, but Karoline's thoughts are with her father, with the promise she made to honor his work. She slips her phone into her pocket, the text's words burning in her mind. As she stands, the reporter steps back, her notepad still clutched tight. Karoline's heart pounds, not with fear but with a growing certainty. What's hidden in those pages, and who else knows she's carrying her father's legacy? The hearing room in the U.S. Capitol pulses with a restless energy, its high ceilings and dark wooden benches amplifying the tension that hangs like a storm cloud. The gallery is packed with reporters, their pens scratching furiously, while lawmakers shift in their seats. Sensing a shift in the air, Karoline Leavitt stands at her bench in the back row, her navy blazer slightly rumpled from the long day, her worn leather notebook clutched in one hand. Her heart pounds, but her face is calm, her brown eyes sharp behind her glasses. The sting of Schiff's earlier interruption lingers, as does the congressman's mocking laughter in the anteroom. But the mysterious text, "Your father would be proud," burns in her mind, steadying her. She's done waiting. The room may see a rookie, but she's ready to show them something else. The chairman calls for the next speaker, and Karoline steps forward, her voice clear and steady. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address the evidence presented for this surveillance law." The murmurs in the room fade, heads turning toward her. Adam Schiff, seated near the front, leans back, his arms crossed, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Karoline opens her notebook, her fingers steady as she begins. "The threats outlined by Congressman Schiff rely on reports that don't hold up," she says, her words measured but firm. She lists dates, agencies, and specific memos, details she's pieced together over months, revealing how data was manipulated to exaggerate dangers. The room grows quiet, the weight of her precision sinking in. A reporter in the gallery, the same young woman who spoke to her earlier, types furiously on her phone, live tweeting every word. Schiff's smirk vanishes. He rises, his voice sharp. "This is baseless, Mr. Chairman Congresswoman Leavitt is speculating without proof." His interruption is loud, almost desperate, and a few of his allies nod. But the room doesn't laugh this time. Karoline's cheeks flush, not with shame but with resolve. She holds up her notebook, her gaze locking onto Schiff's. These aren't speculations. They're facts, cross-checked and documented. The gallery buzzes, phones lighting up as the reporter's tweets spread, hashtags like Leavitt Speaks trending online. Karoline feels the room shift, the weight of attention turning her way. But she also feels the danger. Schiff's eyes narrow, his composure fraying, and she knows he won't let this go easily. The door at the back of the room opens, and a hush falls over the crowd. A man in a gray suit steps inside, his posture straight, his silver hair catching the light. It's Judge Henry Grayson, retired but still a towering figure in legal circles, known for his integrity and for mentoring Karoline after her father's death. His presence commands respect, and even Schiff pauses, his expression tightening. Grayson nods to Karoline, a quiet gesture that speaks volumes, and reaches into his briefcase. He hands the chairman a single document, his voice low but firm. This is a whistleblower's affidavit, corroborating Congresswoman Leavitt's findings. It details pressure on analysts to falsify threat reports. The crowd gasps, and the gallery erupts in whispers. Karoline's heart leaps, her fear giving way to certainty. She meets Grayson's eyes, seeing pride there, and for a moment, she feels her father's presence too. Schiff's face reddens, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. "This is outrageous," he snaps, turning to the chairman. "I demand to know the source of this so-called affidavit." His voice cracks, betraying his panic, and Karoline feels a surge of strength. She knows the whistleblower's identity must stay protected, a promise she made to keep them safe. The reporter's tweets are now flooding social media, and the gallery hums with excitement. Some lawmakers leaning forward, others exchanging glances. A staffer who once whispered about Karoline being a rookie now watches her with wide eyes, his skepticism fading. The tide is turning, but Karoline knows it's not over. Schiff's allies are already huddling, and his demand for sources hangs in the air, a challenge she can't yet answer. She glances at Grayson, who gives her another nod, his calm anchoring her. The affidavit is real, its evidence damning, but Karoline feels the weight of what's next. If she pushes further, she risks exposing her ally. If she stops, Schiff might regain control. Her mind races, replaying her father's lessons. Truth is a shield, but it's also a target. The room watches her, waiting for her next move. The reporter in the gallery pauses her typing, her eyes locked on Karoline, as if sensing the stakes. The chairman calls for order, but the buzz doesn't fade. Karoline closes her notebook, her hands steady now, her resolve hardening. She's crossed a line, and there's no going back. What will Schiff do next? And can she protect those who've trusted her? The hearing room in the U.S. Capitol crackles with a tension so thick it feels like the air might snap. The high ceilings, adorned with gold leaf, loom over the packed benches, where lawmakers sit rigid, their eyes darting between Karoline Leavitt and Adam Schiff. The gallery above buzzes with reporters, their phones glowing as they capture every word. Karoline stands at her bench in the back row, her navy blazer slightly creased, her worn leather notebook open before her. Her hands are steady, but her heart races, pounding with the weight of the moment. She's just presented the whistleblower's affidavit, handed to the chairman by Judge Henry Grayson, her mentor. The document lays bare a damning truth. Schiff's team pressured analysts to inflate security threats to justify the surveillance law. The room is a powder keg, and Karoline has lit the fuse. Schiff rises, his face flushed, his usual polish unraveling. This is defamation. He snaps, his voice cracking as he points at Karoline. Congresswoman Leavitt is peddling conspiracies to undermine this body. His words are loud, but they lack the confidence of his earlier speeches. A few allies nod, but others hesitate, their gazes flickering toward Karoline. She meets Schiff's glare, her brown eyes unwavering behind her glasses. Her father's voice echoes in her mind. Truth doesn't flinch. Caro. It stands. She thinks of the whistleblower, a nervous analyst who trusted her with their story, and the promise she made to protect them. She knows what's at stake, her career, her reputation, maybe more, but she's not backing down. Judge Grayson steps forward, his gray suit impeccable, his silver hair catching the light. At 70, he's a quiet legend, known for his fairness and for mentoring Karoline after her father's death. His presence silences the room, even Schiff pausing mid-rant. I trained her to seek truth. Adam, Grayson says, his voice calm but cutting. You should have known better than to underestimate her. The words land like a gavel, and Karoline feels a surge of pride, tempered by the weight of responsibility. Grayson's support is a shield, but it also paints a target on her back. The gallery erupts in murmurs, phones lighting up with notifications as the junior reporter's live feed goes viral. Hashtags like Leavitt exposes trend across social media, amplifying Karoline's words to millions. Karoline takes a breath and continues, her voice steady, almost soft, but piercing in its clarity. The affidavit shows a pattern of manipulation, she says, flipping to a page in her notebook. Analysts were coerced into altering reports, exaggerating threats to push this law. This isn't about security, it's about control. The room falls silent, her words sinking in. A staffer who once whispered that Karoline was a rookie now leans toward a colleague, his voice low. She's right. Lawmakers shift uncomfortably, some nodding slowly, others glancing at Schiff, whose hands grip his desk, knuckles white. The junior reporter, her dark hair pulled back, types furiously, her tweets spreading like wildfire. The gallery hums with energy, the crowd sensing a turning point. But Schiff doesn't yield. He leans into the microphone, his voice sharp with defiance. I won't be slandered by a novice and her so-called evidence, he says, his eyes blazing. This affidavit is a fabrication, and I'll prove it. His words are bold. But his stammer betrays him, and Karoline sees the cracks in his armor. She knows he's cornered, but a cornered man is dangerous. Her mind races, weighing her next move. She could reveal more names, dates, emails, but doing so might expose the whistleblower, breaking her promise. Or she could stop, letting the affidavit and Grayson's weight carry the day. But risk Schiff regaining control. It's a moral choice, one her father warned her about. Truth can save, but it can also cost everything. The chairman calls for order, his gavel banging, but the room's energy doesn't fade. A woman in the gallery adjusts her scarf, her eyes wide with admiration for Karoline, a young aide near the front, who once laughed at Schiff's jabs, now watches Karoline with quiet respect. The shift is palpable, the tide turning. But Karoline feels the weight of what's next. Schiff's glare cuts through the crowd, a silent promise of retaliation. She glances at Grayson, who stands like a sentinel, his expression unreadable but steady. The reporter's fingers pause on her phone, her gaze meeting Karoline's for a fleeting moment, as if urging her to keep going. Social media is ablaze, but Washington is a battlefield. And Karoline knows this fight is far from over. She closes her notebook, her hands steady, her resolve like steel. The affidavit is out, the truth exposed, but Schiff's defiance hangs in the air, a challenge she can't ignore. Her father's photo, tucked inside her notebook, feels heavier now, a reminder of the legacy she carries. The room watches, waiting for her next words. But Karoline stays silent, letting the truth settle like dust after a storm. The gavel falls, signaling a recess, and the crowd stirs, their murmurs a mix of shock and awe. Karoline steps back, her heart pounding, not with triumph but with the weight of what's to come. Has she won, or has she just begun a war she can't yet see? The hearing room's chaos fades as the heavy oak doors swing shut behind Karoline Leavitt, leaving her in the Capitol's rotunda, a vast echoing space of marble and muted light. The late afternoon sun filters through high windows, casting golden streaks across the polished floor, and the air feels cooler here, a quiet reprieve from the storm she's just weathered. Her navy blazer hangs loose on her shoulders, her worn leather notebook tucked under her arm, its weight both a burden and a shield. Karoline's steps are slow, her legs heavy with exhaustion, but her heart carries a strange mix of relief and ache. The affidavit, the whistleblower's truth, is out, and Schiff's composure lies in tatters. Yet the victory feels fragile, like a breath held too long. She's exposed a lie, but the cost, her reputation, her safety, her promise to protect her source presses against her chest. She pauses near a marble column, her brown eyes tracing the intricate carvings above. The rotunda is nearly empty, its grandeur a stark contrast to the smallness she's felt these past days. Dismissed as a rookie, a nobody. Schiff's accusations, his allies' laughter, the staffers' sneers they've all cut deep, reopening old wounds from a childhood of being underestimated. But today, she stood, and the room listened. Her father's voice, steady and warm, echoes in her mind. Truth is your inheritance, Caro. Carry it well. She clutches her notebook tighter, the faded photo of her and Judge Thomas Leavitt inside it a silent anchor. She's kept her promise to him, but the weight of it leaves her trembling, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Footsteps echo across the marble, and Karoline turns to see Judge Henry Grayson approaching. His gray suit is impeccable, his silver hair catching the light, but it's his eyes kind, steady, familiar that make her breath catch. At 70, he's been her mentor since her father's death, a link to the man who shaped her. He stops beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but gentle. You reminded me of him today, he says, his voice low, almost a whisper. Thomas would have been proud, Karoline, not just of your courage, but of your heart. The words break something open in her, and her eyes well up, tears spilling over before she can stop them. She wipes her cheek, embarrassed, but Grayson's hand stays steady, grounding her. Another set of footsteps, softer this time, draws her attention. The junior reporter, the young woman who's been live tweeting the hearing, steps into the rotunda, her notepad clutched to her chest. Her dark hair is slightly mussed, her expression hesitant but warm. I hope I'm not intruding, she says, her voice quiet. Karoline shakes her head, managing a small smile. The reporter steps closer, her eyes bright with something like awe. I didn't tell you earlier, but my name's Sarah. My dad was a clerk in your father's courthouse in Ohio. He always said Judge Leavitt was the fairest man he knew. Karoline's breath catches, a new wave of emotion rising. She hadn't expected this connection, this thread tying her to her father's legacy through a stranger's memory. The three of them stand together, their voices soft, the rotunda's marble echoing their words like a quiet hymn. Sarah shares a story of her father, how he'd come home from the courthouse inspired by Judge Leavitt's rulings, and Karoline listens, her tears slowing. Grayson adds his own memory of Thomas mentoring young lawyers with patience and wit. For a moment, Karoline feels her father's presence, not as a weight, but as a warmth, wrapping around her like the sunlight in the room. She wipes her eyes again, clutching her notebook, its pages now a testament to her courage and his teachings. "I just wanted to do right by him," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson nods, and Sarah's smile is kind, understanding. Outside, through the rotunda's windows, Karoline glimpses news vans lining the Capitol steps, their lights flashing as reporters swarm. Schiff's allies are scrambling, their voices faint but frantic, trying to spin the narrative. Social media is still ablaze. Sarah's tweets shared thousands of times, calling Karoline the rookie who shook Washington. But here, in this quiet space, the world feels far away. Karoline's heart is full yet heavy with the cost of her stand. She thinks of the whistleblower, safe for now but still at risk if Schiff retaliates. She thinks of her own future, uncertain in this unforgiving city. As they start to walk toward the exit, a young aide, barely out of college, lingers near a doorway, his eyes wide with admiration. He'd been one of the staffers whispering during Schiff's speech, but now he watches Karoline with something like reverence. She doesn't notice, her focus on Grayson and Sarah, but his gaze follows her. Inspired, the rotunda grows quiet again, the sunlight fading as clouds pass overhead. Karoline's steps are steadier now, her tears dried, but Schiff's glare from the hearing lingers in her mind, a hint of battles yet to come. She adjusts her notebook, her father's photo safe inside. What will Schiff do next, and how will she carry this fight forward? The small office in Karoline Leavitt's Ohio district feels like a world away from the Capitol's marble halls. Its walls are lined with framed letters from constituents, a modest desk cluttered with papers, and a single window letting in the soft light of a late autumn afternoon. Karoline sits in a worn chair, her navy blazer draped over its back, her glasses resting on a stack of files. Before her lies a pile of handwritten letters, their envelopes creased from travel, each one a testament to the stand she took weeks ago. A farmer from Dayton writes of renewed trust in government. A teacher from Akron calls her a role model for her students. Karoline's fingers trace the words, her brown eyes misty with a quiet pride, but also with the weight of what her fight has cost. The scars of being dismissed, of standing alone against Schiff's machine, linger like bruises beneath her skin. Outside, the streets of her small town hum with the rhythm of everyday life, pickup trucks rolling by, leaves skittering across sidewalks. It's a far cry from Washington's frenzy, where news vans still linger, chasing the fallout of her clash with Adam Schiff. The surveillance law, once a tool for unchecked power, has been revised, its new draft prioritizing transparency, thanks to the firestorm Karoline ignited. Editorials in major papers praise her integrity, calling her the conscience of Congress. Schiff, meanwhile, faces an ethics probe, his influence fading as allies distance themselves. Karoline doesn't gloat. She feels no joy in his downfall. Her father's voice, steady and wise, reminds her justice isn't about winning. Caro, it's about setting things right. She's done that. But the path was lonelier than she'd imagined. She rises, slipping on her coat, and drives to a quiet cemetery on the edge of town. The air is crisp, the sky streaked with the pinks and golds of a fading sunset. Her father's grave sits beneath an old oak, its stone simple but dignified, etched with Judge Thomas Leavitt, beloved father and servant of justice. Karoline kneels, placing a fresh daisy beside the faded photo she's carried in her notebook, a young Karoline and her father, smiling outside his courthouse. "I did it, Dad," she whispers, her voice breaking. Her heart is full, yet heavy with the cost of her stand, the sleepless nights, the whispered threats from Schiff's allies, the fear that she'd fail the whistleblower who trusted her. Tears fall, but they're not bitter. They're a release, a quiet healing. As if her father's pride reaches her through the autumn breeze, back in her car. Karoline's phone buzzes with a new email. It's from Sarah, the junior reporter who live-tweeted the hearing, now a full-time journalist at a Cleveland paper. Attached is her latest article, titled, "The Rookie Who Changed Congress." Sarah writes of Karoline's courage, of how a small-town lawyer's daughter shook Washington's foundations. "You showed us that truth doesn't need a title," Sarah writes, and Karoline smiles, her chest warming. She thinks of their moment in the rotunda with Judge Grayson, of the bonds forged through her father's legacy. Sarah's article is spreading online, shared by thousands, inspiring young women in Ohio and beyond. Karoline's fight has rippled outward, touching lives she'll never meet. Driving home, the sunset deepens, painting the sky in hues of fire and shadow. Karoline passes familiar landmarks, a diner where she campaigned, a school where she spoke to kids about civic duty. The world feels a little fairer, but she knows it's not perfect. Schiff's probe may not end his career. Washington's power games will go on. The scars of being underestimated by Schiff, by the congressman in the anteroom, by the staffers who laughed, will fade but never vanish. They're part of her now, like the notebook she still carries, its pages a record of her resolve. She thinks of the young aide who watched her in the rotunda, his eyes bright with inspiration. Maybe he'll carry this forward, or someone else will, touched by her story. Karoline pulls into her driveway, her small house dark except for a porch light. She sits for a moment, the engine off, the silence wrapping around her. Her father's photo is back in her notebook, safe but ever present. She doesn't need to look at it to feel his lessons, his love, his belief in her. The fight isn't over. There are more battles, more truths to uncover. But tonight, she's at peace, knowing she's honored her promise. The sunset fades, leaving a single star in the sky, and Karoline steps out, her steps light. Courage doesn't need a title to change history, but what will she do with the history she's begun to shape? Karoline stood alone in the fading light, her notebook closed, the weight of her father's photo a quiet comfort in her pocket. The Capitol's echo faded, leaving only the soft hum of truth settling in. Was it victory or just a moment of clarity in a noisy world? Sometimes the loudest change comes from the softest voice, daring to speak when others stay silent.